Live. First and foremost, thank you for watching Evolve Network. Special show not on Tuesday, it's on Monday. We have a great guest on tonight, Mr. Marc Victor. First and foremost, sir, thank you very much for coming on. Discuss some topics about what's going on in America right now. Throughout your busy schedule, I know you may be doing office move and stuff like that, and you probably had to move some things. So first and foremost, thank you for doing what you're doing to accommodate to be on tonight so we can have a good chat. Adam, thank you very much for putting this in play so we can, pick somebody's brain that's in the know on some of these things.
Yeah, man. Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Adam, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I really wanted to pick your brain on this stuff because basically the main fact is you know what you're talking about. So I was thinking that you would be a fantastic guest for just basically like looking around at the world. You know a lot about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And I was kind of wondering, like, where does that fit in? Where do like civil liberties fit in to what we have with the lockdowns and like you must wear a mask and they're going to close down all the businesses and like all these things that we're seeing the government do? Is this like, how does that work from a legal standpoint? Are these laws, like, do we have a constitution and a Bill of Rights still? How does this work with that?
Well, it's really a very, very broad question. So hard to give a really concise answer to that. But I guess I would say first, the Constitution means what the people who wear the black robes say it means, right? So let's just start there. I mean, the court says what these various words on paper mean. And, I'm very much giving you a general answer across the country. But we've got a case in 1905. It's this Jacobson versus Massachusetts, maybe Massachusetts versus Jacobson. I can't remember. It's an old case. And it dealt with, I think it was a smallpox issue. And strangely enough, it was the state of Massachusetts where Adam lives, where I used to live. There was a case about forced vaccinations. In other words, the state wanted to forcefully vaccinate people against this sort of new smallpox thing, and got all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, in a decision that, I argue isn't very relevant today, but the courts have followed it. Our Supreme Court that we have now has recently cited this decision with approval, so it remains the law. In essence, what they're saying is, look, the responsibility to regulate health, welfare, safety, and morals, yes, morals, health, welfare, safety, and morals, falls on the states. The states have this power. And so the courts are very reluctant to get in the way of states making decisions, especially over health. You have to actually find a fundamental constitutional right that's been violated. Now, I've brought a lawsuit. I brought a lawsuit against the governor of Hawaii for some strategy reasons. We decided to withdraw that lawsuit. My clients made that decision, so we followed it. We didn't get a result, but there was another lawsuit, and it went the same way in Hawaii, where the federal court basically cited this Jacobson decision. Courts across the nation have been citing it as well. I'm not so willing to go so far to say that what we have here is a pandemic or emergency exception to the Constitution, because the Constitution contains no such exception. But the way the courts weigh things, remember, no right is absolute. Every right has sort of exceptions and limitations. And think of it like this. Pretty much if you, under some circumstances, can be put in a cage or even executed, which our Supreme Court has said can be done under certain circumstances, what that means is, under certain circumstances, the government has a right to end your life. Well, so they can end your life, they can incarcerate you, they can fine you, and under certain, according to the Jacobson case, they can force vaccinate you. Can they make you wear a mask? Can they do these other things? I'm going to answer probably, because the courts have so far basically deferred to the states. Now, there's been some exceptions across the country. These are mostly in areas where governors have assumed powers because the statutes have said things like, okay, governor, if there's an emergency, you get to decide what an emergency is, and then you get to take unilateral action to sort of issue these decrees. So said another way, you can act like the legislature and the executive branch. You can make the law and enforce the law, but only for a period of time. So in the case of Hawaii, it says 60 days. And so what's occurred is on day 61, the governor just simply extends this. Now, this hasn't been challenged yet in Hawaii. I intend to challenge it soon. But it has been, there are different, of course, versions of this across the country, and these have successfully been challenged in other places. So it's not that the courts have said you don't have this power. It's just that under the statutes of a particular state, the state hasn't granted the power to the governor for, in this case, in my example, for more than 60 days. So there have been some limited victories on that front, but for the most part, unless the courts change the way they've been doing business, they're mostly deferring to these governors, and now the governors are deferring to the mayors, right, to make these kinds of decisions. And of course, this is what's happened, right? I mean, it's hard to be too critical here because we got a situation where nobody really knows what's going on. Okay, we've got this coronavirus thing, especially early. Nobody knew anything about how deadly this is, how contagious this is. And so it's very, very difficult. I don't envy the politicians, at least early on, who had to make something. They lose either way, right? Whether if they lock down, then the anti-lockdown crowd says, hey, you can't do this. If they don't lock down and then people die, they get criticized for not taking that action. So in complicating matters, if you want to argue that this coronavirus is, the worst thing ever and we're all going to die, okay, watch CNN. You'll get plenty of data for that. If you want to argue that this corona thing is all BS and it doesn't really affect too much, then you watch Fox, right? So it's a matter of we're in a period of time right now where it's difficult to have a rational conversation because we can't even get agreement on the facts. I mean, we don't really know as we sit here, right? I mean, Marc Victor doesn't have access to these facts, so I can't say yes, this and that is occurring. I got to rely on somebody else.
Well,
data.
You have access to logic. You're a very logical and rational person. And I know that you know the history of governments. And I think at a time like this, when I look around and we're essentially, for all intents and purposes, like in a totalitarian police state right now, like as far as I'm concerned, the way it looks to me. So like, I think to me, it's completely a valid question to ask, what's more dangerous, the virus or the government? Because we look at the history of how governments have used crisis to have tyrannies. And to me, when I look around and I look at the state that we're in, I feel like government tyranny is a very dangerous thing that we're not really taking into account right now. And we got our eyes on the virus. But if we were to follow this trajectory of how much power the government has throughout the future, where are we going to end up with this government power over our lives? Is that dangerous too?
Well, of course, to me, this is an easy question. Really the leading cause of death is government, right? I mean, governments have killed than virtually anything else. And so it's true that governments start wars, governments do all kinds of things that kill people. But I think we need to be careful, right, in just sort of labeling generally government, because governments do good things as well. I mean, they spend trillions of dollars on things, and so one could point to things that governments have done to also save lives as well. So very difficult to say. But I think it's interesting if you take a look at what we call all-cause mortality. In other words, one thing that it seems we can get pretty good data on is how many people are dead, right? How many dead bodies do we have? Forget what the cause is. How many people are dead? It sure does not seem that more people are dead since the coronavirus has shown up on the scene. If you just look at that stat, all-cause mortality, and of course we have these statistics going way, way back, and there's actually a physics professor named Rancourt, I think his name is, I forget the first name. He's done some really pretty good work in this area, and he shows very conclusively that more people are not dead as a result of the coronavirus. So whatever is causing people to die, whether it's coronavirus or something else being labeled as coronavirus, we really don't have more dead bodies than we've ever had. If you take what he calls the winter burden at this period of time, and you look back for many, many, many years, it's roughly the same amount of people that are dead. So I think it's probably reasonable to conclude that we don't have some big giant crisis that's killing far more people than things that normally kill people. Maybe they're being labeled differently. You know, you might die of something and now it's coronavirus. Well, why would somebody do that? Well, if the hospitals are getting more money from the federal government because they label something a corona death, I mean, to me, it's common sense that if you give somebody a financial incentive, and this can be said in any area, right? If we give somebody money for something, they're going to be encouraged to do that thing. And so if the federal government says we're going to give the hospitals money if they say that the death was caused by coronavirus or they died from corona or something like that, and I think it's $30-something thousand extra, they have a very, especially if you're looking at hospitals that were shut down for a while and weren't able to do elective surgeries and make their money from other sources, they're businesses, right? And they're hurting like everybody else. You know, for anybody who has a business, if the government said, hey, every time you say this, then you're going to get a bunch of extra money, you're going to do everything you can to say that. So I think that this corona thing, look, it's going to pass, right? I mean, New York City went through a giant peak and a lot of people died, and then it kind of slowed down, and the same thing has happened virtually everywhere. That's what's happening here in Arizona from what I see. I mean, cases are up. It's not clear to me whether people dying from coronavirus is up or not. I guess we're going to have to wait to get some of the data. But at some point, enough people get this, and as I understand, if it acts like every other coronavirus, and of course there are many, then we'll have some type of herd immunity at some point, and this thing will all be in the rear view mirror. So the question will then be, what did we learn from this experience? And what we learned is the government doesn't hesitate, at least this particular government at this particular time doesn't hesitate to start putting in all kinds of draconian measures. I do not think we are in a totalitarian police state. If you take a look at what a totalitarian police state is, we are very far from that.
Well, wait a minute.
Hold on. Can I touch on something, Adam, before, because we'll get into that, because I'll lose my train of thought. Mark touched on two things that actually are, or one thing that actually is happening. One other case that actually, from personal experience, was very peculiar based off something he said. You discussed, you know, the governors are going to the mayors. That happened here in Massachusetts. You saw the governor and the mayor waiting for this meeting to be addressed on how to handle X, Y, and Z. And the very day that they both came out of that meeting, because of political reasons, you saw the governor go, I got to wait. And you saw the mayor go, shut it down now. I don't know why the governor is X. So you already saw them fighting and arguing because they were given the same information, but they have to do two different things because they're speaking to two different masses. And I thought that was very interesting to see right live on TV, like, wow, that just really happened. And you went to touch on the vaccine case. Geez, excuse me, sorry. Unfortunately, when I was young, you know, I went through a divorce and stuff like that. And thank God, me and mom get along great. We got a teenager. We see eye to eye. We're good friends. But one of the judges that was presiding over our case ended up getting kicked off the bar because she forced a young man with Down syndrome and a young woman with Down syndrome, forced them to have abortion. And, you know, it kind of goes into like, hey, you know, this is being forced. These shots are being forced. In that specific case, that judge was disbarred. Like, she was kicked off the bench, get out. I mean, they ended up suing her. I don't remember following up the case, but, you know, to kind of go on the forced vaccines, even though that's a law in place, that can still be fought later on, correct? To be overturned?
Anything can be fought. I mean, that's what we lawyers do. I mean, that something is a law in the books doesn't mean that it can't be fought. At some point, you fight it, and if the Supreme Court says, sorry, it's constitutional, then it's constitutional. There's still other fights, you know, okay, it's constitutional, but can it be used for this purpose in this case? You know, I think it's also important to say, and I think we got to be very careful to not exaggerate things, right? Like on the issue of a totalitarian police state. A totalitarian police state means that the cops can enter your house anytime. They don't need to.
That's not true. That's not true. Can I read you the definition?
Well, okay. Everybody can have their own definitions.
Well, this is the definition from dictionary.com. The
Really?
definition, the definition of totalitarian is.
I bet he knows it.
of or relating to a centralized government that does not tolerate parties of differing opinions and that exercises dictatorial control over many aspects of life. Now, let me just say, when I go outside and I look around, dictatorial control over many aspects of life. We're all standing on spots. They're closing down businesses. Cover your face. Shut the fuck up. Like, there's this overbearing weight on you that you need to do what you're told. And then if you say anything about this that the party doesn't like, they'll cancel you on Facebook. They'll cancel you on social media. So
Facebook and social media,
right.
Different issues. But let me give you an example. So this doesn't happen in a totalitarian police state, right? I mean, we had a client who owns a cafe called Euro Pizza Cafe in Fountain Hills, Arizona. And one of our governor's edicts was during this period of time to the restaurants, okay, you can serve, but only for takeaway. In other words, you got to close the dining room. And people came and picked up their food. And then even though she had her tables closed outside and chairs were upside down, people would come and they'd put the chairs down and they'd sit down and they'd start eating. And of course, when the police would come, they would say, hey, people are eating on your tables. And she would say, look, my tables are closed. And they would say, well, people are eating. And she would say, well, and if you want to tell them they can't eat there, that's fine. But I'm not a police officer. I'm not going to go out there and shoo them away. So she got cited with a criminal offense for violating the governor's order. Well, we got that case dismissed. And so in a totalitarian police state, you have dictatorial things happen, which means you have the three branches of government, right? The judicial, the legislature, and the executive collapsed into one. That's what a dictator is. We do not have that here. You can still bring a case. There are still limitations on the government. If they enter your house without a warrant, you can bring a motion to suppress. And if there's not a good argument on the other side, they're going to lose. So the courts are still operating. Now, this isn't to say that we have a completely free society either, right? Imagine a spectrum. On one side, you got the totalitarian police state where the government can do anything. And on the other side, you have what we want, which is more of a free society. We're in the middle somewhere, okay? And if you talk to people who live in places that are far less free than us, like, for example, my buddy Alessandro, who's rode out this storm in Spain. Things were much different in Spain. There were times there where you needed a permission slip from the government just to go outside and walk the dog. We never had anything. We never had anything like that. We had some that said other things. And I also think it's important to know, I think, to be fair, we shouldn't automatically assume that these politicians are doing things with bad faith, right? I think a lot of them think they're acting in good faith. What they think they're doing is saving lives. They've got information that they believe masks save lives and social distancing saves lives. Now, I don't believe that in regard to COVID-19, because I think as the data has come out, we can probably say there's no evidence that masks save lives. They don't protect the person wearing them, nor do they protect other people, nor does social distancing. Not when you're dealing with a virus that's in the air. That's different than spread through droplets. But yet they believe it does, so they are in good faith trying to protect people, right? And if indeed this thing turned out to be a lot more deadly and communicable, I think then the criticism would have been the government didn't act fast enough. It acted too slowly. In fact, that will be some of the criticisms that you'll see in the election. So to me, this is a very hard call. It's not, you know, when there's a new virus, it's coming over. We don't know how dangerous, how communicable. We don't know anything about it. You got to give a little bit of leeway to say, hey, everybody stay inside because we don't all want to be dead.
Really? So you think that there's something that's worth like, to me, if you don't have freedom, you don't have anything. So if now we're living in the society, like when I go out and I look around, like I was saying, I go to the grocery store, stand in the spot, walk down the one-way thing of the aisle, shut down your business, cover your face, shut up, don't say, and there's this idea, like when I go out and I look at the physical reality, that to me, like no matter what the pandemic is to me, I'm going to go that extreme. It's never worth giving the government that much control of your life, because you know as much as anybody, once you open the door for government control, that door never really closes, right? So you were saying like, oh, this will be in our rear view. I don't think it will. I think that once we've given the government this amount of control over our lives and they've done a litmus test of what we'll tolerate. Governments throughout history, this is what they do. They're trying to control you. They're trying to get more control, and they're trying to get bigger and more power. And even if some of these people are doing these things through good intentions, the end result is still more power and more control. And they've opened the door and they saw, look what we can do. And that's a very dangerous precedent to start.
One thing, but the difference, Mark, before you answer that or have a comment on it, is Adam and I, we work well together because we can agree to disagree on things. My background in the Marine Corps, I was a nuclear, biological, chemical defense specialist. Nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, viruses, that was my thing. It was a very small amount of people that did that in every branch of service, specialized school. I disagree with him on this because I know a lot more how viruses work, especially when they're unpredictable, but when you're also learning that this one has morphed and changed, I'm sorry, I will stay home because I understand that a virus doesn't care about your ego. It doesn't care about what you feel. It doesn't care about government, because if we don't sit here and try to put things in place where we can live, even though, and try to move forward as a society, because we need to get our economy moving. How do we adjust for that? I think some changes are coming out like that. And like you discussed earlier, a lot of people are in the unknown. If we don't really focus on that, none of what he just said will matter. That's where I'm coming from.
I think that we in the, what I'll call loosely the pro-freedom crowd, it's very important that we don't sort of overstate the case, right? One example that I brought up earlier, this 1905 case where the government in Massachusetts was forcing vaccinations on people. Okay, we don't have that issue normally, right? I mean, I suppose if you want to go to school, but you can even opt out of that in many cases. And so that was during a certain period of time. We don't have that at the moment. So there are examples of government sort of doing things for a certain period of times and then stopping. Although I have to admit, I do have a very serious concern over governments grabbing more power, because that definitely is the trend, and that's generally what happens. But I think that we got to be very, very careful in terms of how we identify the problems, right? Because when you talk about, well, when I go to the supermarket, this happens, that happens, and this happens. The supermarket is a private business. They can do whatever they want at any time. They can say, you got to wear a mask, you got to social distance, and you can't wear a red shirt, and you can't talk about Trump or whatever they want to say. It's their business. They should be allowed to have any rules they want. In fact, that's how I generally these pandemic things should be dealt with. That I closed my law firm down before the governor of Arizona said you had to send everybody home, because I was worried about it. I also opened up my law firm before the governor said it was time to open up. So I made my decisions based on the best information I had at the time. But if other businesses want to completely shut down, why don't we let private businesses make the appropriate decisions for how they're going to attract? And then people can decide themselves whether they want to take a risk. I mean, to me, the really easy answer here is what we people in the freedom crowd have been clamoring about for a long time. Let's privatize more things. Then we can let the private owner of the property make the decision about whether the business is open or not. We have these problems now because we have so much government-run property. And if you accept the notion of government-run property, well, then the government gets to decide whether the courts are open and what the police station does and what the fire station does. And as much as I hate to say it, the public roads and the public schools and all the things that are public now, imagine if they were private. Well, we could then decide on a private basis when the risk is too high. Because this particular issue, this pandemic issue, is, I think, a very thorny issue to think about, right? And just let me give you an extreme case to think about. If you know that you have some kind of a really bad health condition, say you got AIDS or something, and this thing is very communicable, and you know it, and you intentionally decide to have sex with another person, and you don't tell that person about it, we can all agree that that's a crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then, as we drop down in what I call the mens rea scale.
Well, I think there was actually a case on that. The woman was charged. She was called the Black Widow.
There are several of them, yeah. And I think even us in the freedom crowd, we agree with that idea. So what if we drop down the mental state to recklessness? In other words, look, I don't know if I've got this deadly disease. I might, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to go have sex with another person anyway. Crime or no crime? Okay, well, let me answer it for you. Crime, because this is.
I mean, yeah.
That results in a serious harm. Fair enough. If that's a crime, are you reckless? And let me just explain the difference between recklessness and negligence for a moment. Negligence is when you're not aware. You had it, but you didn't know you had it. You gave it to someone else. Okay, generally, we're going to excuse you from a crime there. Recklessness is you have an intent, you have a conscious awareness. You know, I might have it. There's a real chance I got it, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to do it anyways. Reckless conduct all the time, we consider that a criminal offense. Like, say you're recklessly driving your car down the road, you're drunk, you're on the wrong side of the road, you're causing other people to swerve. We don't have to wait until there's a car accident, right? We can take somebody with a firearm on New Year's who's blasting rounds up into the air. We can call that a crime because they're being reckless about hurting another person.
Right.
So then the question becomes, in the midst of a pandemic, and imagine it's a real pandemic, and let's now increase the deadliness of it and increase the communicableness of it. In the midst of a pandemic, aren't we all reckless that you might have it? And if you do have, and if that's true, then isn't it reasonable for the government or somebody, because the government enforces crimes, to say, look, because you're going to commit this crime by going out in public, you got to stay in your house.
Why aren't they doing that with these riots?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think my personal opinion is we're not there in this one. I don't know that we got even a real pandemic here, given that if it's actually true, and I think it is, that all-cause mortality is not up. In other words, there aren't more people dead than there's ever been around this time of year, then I don't think that we've got a real pandemic here. It doesn't seem that communicable. It seems very possibly deadly for people in an age group where they're older, or people who have other comorbidities, fine. But you're not in a situation that I would say, if you're not in one of those groups, then you're reckless about spreading it to another person. So to me, this is a world now where you got to decide if you want to accept the risk of going out into the world, because other people might have not just coronavirus, but the flu or tuberculosis or something else that they may have. This is the risk we take by engaging with other people in the world. You always have a right to shelter in place in your house if you choose to.
Well, Mark, I seen I seen a post you posted on your Facebook. We're friends on Facebook, and you were saying that for people under 70, the death rate was 99.6%, right? And I don't know if you caught this. The World Health Organization said it was very rare for asymptomatic people to spread this disease.
Yeah, I think you stated it a little bit backwards. It's not that the death rate is 99. It's that you have a very high chance of not dying if you're under 70.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So your survival rate is 99.6% if you're under 70. And I don't know if you caught the World Health Organization thing I just said. They said it's very rare for asymptomatic people to be spreading this disease. So when I look at those two things, and then just like, there's some other things I look at, why are we doing all this then? If asymptomatic people, it's very rare to spread it. And this is from the people that we're supposed to be getting all of our scientific information from. And they're telling us that, what are we doing? Why are we still doing this then?
Well, I agree with you. But of course, this information is good for hindsight, right? I mean, on day one, when we're all looking at the people in Wuhan and everybody's running around and everybody's getting sick, and all of a sudden people start getting sick in New York, and what's this about? And bring in the respirators and this and that, and we don't really know.
That was weeks ago. That was weeks ago.
Not well. I'm saying at the early stages of a pandemic,
right?
We really know. So I'm a lot more sort of forgiving of people acting in good faith who are trying to protect lives of other people. I got a little bit of. I think we should have a little bit more flexibility then. As the data starts coming in, though, and it starts looking like, hey, if you're under 70 and you don't have these problems, I agree with you. I think governments are far too heavy-handed with this right now. To me, the question is, where do we go from here? And I think actually this is a really, really excellent time to do something in the world. I know a lot of people are feeling down about what's going on because look at the Republicans look terrible. They look, to me, the worst ever. The only thing that makes them look not so terrible is the Democrats look even more horrible. And really, they frankly don't look all that much different, right? Because through the issues and you say, well, how do you feel about national health care? Love it, love it. How do you feel about the drug war? Well, don't really want to end it, don't really want to end it. How do you feel about taxes? They're good, they're good. Maybe we should adjust them a tad bit here, right? Trump's giant big tax reform package, not impressed, right? So there's not really that much difference between the dumb party and the dumber party, but people are getting frustrated with this now. And so it provides a really excellent opportunity to do a couple of things. Number one, I think that this is the time that we need to start thinking about, I'm going to throw a word out there that you guys aren't going to like, globalization.
Fuck that.
Let me tell you why we need to talk about it.
Okay.
There are facts about the world, and let's just talk about a few of them.
Hey, I'm always open to learn, you know.
Somebody did something in China that affected us. People are doing things all over the world that put us at risk.
You know what? That's a very good point.
And so we're living in a world now different than, say, maybe a Murray Rothbard may have described. You know, the typical libertarian analysis deals with one neighbor and the other neighbor and who's trespassing. Murray Rothbard could never have envisioned that somebody in China could be working, say, recklessly on artificial intelligence, might be working on easy nukes. Think about easy nukes for a moment. Imagine we have a scientific discovery that makes it really easy for the average Joe to go down to Home Depot and work in his garage over the weekend and make a nuclear warhead.
They sell tannerite in Texas by the gallon at the sports store.
So if we could probably agree that, like every other technology, pretty much if you want it, you can get it, right? I'm sure at the time that guns were finally invented, not everybody had them, and you had a big advantage if you had a gun. But let's imagine the time is coming soon where probably everybody who wants a nuclear weapon is going to have one. Well, if that happens right now, that's the end of the human race. So we need to start thinking globally. There are things going on in the world that we need to be able to say, hold on, you are violating what we sometimes call the non-aggression principle, which I call the live and let live principle. You're affecting other people. You're putting them at risk in other places in the world. We've got to figure out a way to live in a global society now. I'm not talking necessarily about a global dictatorship or anything like that. Although, take a thought experiment with me for a moment.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thought experiment with me. Imagine a world where what is enforced in every country is basically what I'll call the non-aggression principle. And so let's just break that down a minute and say this. Let's describe it as you don't get to aggress against another person. No force, no fraud, no coercion, and no substantial risk of such thing. Like I can't put a gun in your face and say, well, I haven't hit you with the bullet yet. That's enough, right, for us to take action. And so what's enforced everywhere in the world is that policy. What's the problem?
Okay, I'll tell you what the problem is. And Sean, I want to get you in on this, but
I didn't know that this was coming, but I meant what I said. I love hearing and learning other thought processes. And if there's a way to, cut those lines where someone comes from another country and they have to understand when they come in here, like you can't do X, Y, and Z, I don't see something wrong with that.
I do, and I'll tell you why. Sean, I mean, Mark, basically what you're talking about is the New World Order. This is global. You're literally endorsing the New World Order right now because the same as everybody. We've had this conversation a million times, like when I was younger and shit. Like, you're the one who got me into libertarianism, man. You were an anarchist, right? And now you're talking about globalization. I'm shocked right now, and I'll tell you why. Because in my mind, when I look at the logic of this, if we're going to consolidate all of this power into these globalists who are going to control the world, isn't that dangerous? What happens if they don't follow the non-aggression principle? What happens if all this power gets consolidated and they become tyrants? Now we're all under this global system of tyrants. Now what? What are we going to do? There's no nation states to escape to where you cannot follow these pricks' rules. Isn't that dangerous?
What happened if you had long hair? You'd look like your sister. We could do what if, ands, and buts all day long.
Well, that's a legit question to me.
A couple of things. Number one, whether we like globalism or not, it's here. And the best example of that is the coronavirus.
Oh, my God. Yeah, okay.
In China that affected us. There are many other things that they're doing in China and in Yemen and in other places around the world. This problem isn't going away. It's only getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We're also in a world where I can pick up my phone and I can buy anything from anywhere in the world, just like that. We can travel globally. Corporations now operate across different countries. We got to figure out a way to get to peace quickly, or we're going to wind up destroying ourselves.
And that's a world government that does that?
It happens. It happens in the United States, Adam. I'll explain to you why. Like gun laws. You can go from one state to the next, and you can be legal. The second you cross the border, you're in jail. That's a problem.
No,
that's just one law. There's many laws like that. That's a problem.
You can escape and go to another state. So if you're living in a state that you don't like what they're doing, you can go somewhere else. Now, if the world is under this government and non-aggression principle, but they don't do that, like they never do ever. You look at the history of governments, they're always trying to get more control of you. They're always trying to get more power. They're always doing all this shit. And it's like, Mark, if you're familiar with the term democide,
let me give you another example.
Can I just say
hold on, because I'll forget. I'll give you another example. You just had a man that was arrested in Alabama, I believe, that had a medical marijuana card, and now he's looking at 5 years in jail. For what?
Okay, but
you tell me he has to move out of his state? No.
Right. But then you can go to another state and not have to deal with that shit.
I don't want to be misunderstood here. I did not say I think we should have a world government. What I said is what we should have is the non-aggression principle, which I would prefer to call the live in, let live principle, of enforced everywhere in the world. That's what I actually want. So let me break it down for you like this, guys.
Okay.
Here's how the world works. And I'm going to state it succinctly here.
All right.
Whoever's got the biggest gun makes the rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's been the rule since day one.
Right.
At the moment, the people who are pro-freedom don't have the biggest gun. Somebody else has the biggest gun, the people who are, say, the Republicans or the Democrats, and they get to impose whatever rules they like on us. What I'm suggesting is we need immediately more pro-freedom people so we can start making the rules. What rules do we want to make? You got to follow the live and let live principle. And if you don't, well, that's when you can be in trouble and taken to jail. If you do, you're left alone, whether anybody likes it or not. That's where we need to be working, because things like privacy, remember this discussion we used to have ages ago about how important privacy was? Privacy's dead. There's no privacy. The government, any government, can watch you, listen to you, track you from a satellite in the sky.
They already do.
It's dead. The best you can hope for is that the person who's watching is watching for a violation of the live and let live principle. Mm-hmm. That's the best you can hope for. Not only that, I would say I can live with that. If what we're actually looking for is a real violation of the live and let live principle.
But they're not. They're not. You know how governments work. They're not going to work like that.
But the reason they're not is because we have failed to convince enough people that our philosophy makes more sense. And that's what we need to change. And this is the time to change it right now, because more people are starting to see how the government bungled this entire thing all over the world. More people are starting to see, hey, you know, the Republicans and the Democrats, they're pretty much the same. More people are starting to see and get frustrated with the current state of affairs. There's uprisings. We've seen the Black Lives Matter movement. They're upset about something. They want something changed, but they don't really know what. Defund the police, retrain the police. They don't know what the real problem is because they're not asking the right questions. We need to get that anger and that those people who are upset channeled in the right direction. What should you be angry about? What you should be angry about is that the government has been fermenting aggression by making aggression legal, by smashing in front doors of people who are alleged to smoke marijuana inside peacefully. That's aggression. That's the law allowing aggression. We need to be anti-aggression for every individual, every organization, every group, and every government. I don't care who you are. I don't care what group you're with. If you are aggressing against another person, you are acting, should be illegally, and you should be charged with violating the live and let live principle. So I'm starting a movement. I hope you guys will join. I'm going to launch it about a year from now. It's called the Live and Let Live movement, where what we're doing is we're taking the best of the freedom crowd and we're updating it for a global world.
You know, it's funny you touch on that too. I unfortunately, you know, we've stayed off this topic a bit because it's ever evolving and moving every single day. You know, and it's, you know, I just think that it's a time for me to, you know, just listen, sit back and watch. And, you know, I try to sit here and think that Adam and I can have thoughtful discussions coming from another thought process. And of course, yesterday, you know, Black Lives Matter movement leader here in Boston, I see the video and I wanted to throw up in my mouth. Monica Cannon Grant, I don't know how she's allowed to literally threaten the mayor, go online. I mean, the video I saw the other day was white and black people and laden with expletives. You know, if you're a black man and you know you need literally, and I'm not misquoting, if you need to get that credit score up, you know, go get that white man and woman. That's great, but if it's time for us to talk, get in the back of the room. And the first thing I could think about was, I'm pretty sure Rosa Parks fought to not sit in the back of the bus or the room. It was the most racist thing I've ever seen. And to see what's gone on here in Boston and to watch the mayor and other politicians before that came out, you could see those racial lines coming out. I mean, the person she said that about is another person that's running against her who is black, married to a white man. And the things that she said to her, I will not even repeat on the air because I just wanted to vomit. Like you said, that aggression, that's all I see. I just see racist epithet and aggression. What do you want? Oh, you want to just like violence. Literally, your nonprofit's called Violence in Boston. Okay, I'm not jiving with that. So you're right on that. I mean, unfortunately, that's happening right here in the city. I mean, you don't even want to drive in the city late at night.
Look, the question to me is, do we have enough reasonable people in the world right now to coalesce around an idea that aggression should be illegal? That nobody.
I think we do. I think we just need to stop focusing on the loud people and really get together. Yeah.
My movement is not aimed at trying to convince unreasonable people to do anything. I can't deal with unreasonable people. My movement is aimed at reasonable people to say, look, it's time for the reasonable people to have the biggest gun, if you will, for the reasonable people to get behind one principle, the live and let live principle, to deal with people without this crazy stuff from the past about what color are you. We're never going to get past racism until we get past racism, right? We need to get to the point where the color of your skin is as important as the color of your hair, where nobody really cares anymore. I think there's enough people. In fact, I think there's a majority of people who feel that way. And we not focus on the few instances of when you have a white police officer and a black citizen gets mistreated. Okay, they're good cops and they're a bad cop. My experience has been the vast majority of them are good. However, they're forced to enforce bad laws, right? So it's a real position for a good cop to say, I got to enforce a bad law. That's up. The problem we have is not racism. The problem we have is the law is wrong. We
That's
need
right.
to fix the law. And what do I mean by fixing the laws? And I'm talking about specifically criminal law here. If it's not a violation of the live and let live principle, in other words, if nobody used force or fraud or coercion or a substantial threat of those things, they should be left alone. And what we've done is we've created a situation where people, peaceful people and cops are like this now because the law's been wrong, right? You could have a peaceful, say, prostitution deal between consenting adults. Nobody's using force or fraud or coercion there. Of course, I'm assuming no pimp, none of that stuff, which is many times the case, certainly always the case in a legal prostitution market. They should be left alone. People get upset when the police pull them over for BS kind of reasons, shake them down, get them out of the car, make them wait to ask if they have firearms. All the things that the law allows right now legally for cops to do has gone too far.
Question for you. You discussed a problem with the law in police officers as well, back to blue as well. But there's one case that you were part of, Adam, when I was discussing this, and I remember, with what's going on with recent events and stuff like that, it brought back that memory from a few years ago. And I wonder, even though the case is done, from the best of my recollection, I'm curious to see how much people review that case and go, man, that was so wrong. And the case I'm discussing is the officer gunning the kid down in the hallway, right in front of his girlfriend or his fiance. They had
talking about. Oh, the officer down, you said?
Yeah. They had the air pistol out the thing. The way he, this is coming from a Marine Corps, combative weapon instructor. The way he handled that, watching that, I watched it over and over, and I was like, I wanted to throw up, one, and two, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like that case, and believe the kid gets off, like, and I sit here and go, how?
You said the officer got off.
Yeah.
Well, I can only speak about that case in generalities.
I know.
The officer was charged with second-degree murder, which requires a big mental state. And maybe that one should have been charged as negligent homicide, which is a different yet important distinction. So, cases have to be charged properly. And
that officer's still allowed to be employed because there's no way that he should be employed after that.
I don't know what the state of that officer is, but I can't really say too much about that case. But look, I'll also say being a cop's a tough job, right? They got to make split-second decisions to pull out a gun and fire or not fire. And sometimes what you got is a good police officer who made a bad split-second decision. Doesn't mean it's racism, right? It means that they made a bad split-second decision. It can be very hard. Also, cops are required in the street to make decisions about whether they got reasonable suspicion or probable cause to do something. And a lot of times these issues will be split at the Supreme Court 5-4. So the cop might be acting unconstitutionally, but 4 Supreme Court justices thought it was fine. So it is a hard job. It doesn't mean every time a cop does something wrong that we got a racism problem. The big problem is the law is wrong. We need to square, and I'm not all of the law, by the way. I just recently had the really pleasure of reviewing all of American jurisprudence to take the bar exam in Hawaii. And I can tell you there's not very much I would change about contracts law, torts law, real estate law, family law, corporations law, agency law. Not much I would change about how we do trials, how we do appeals, how the justice system functions. The one thing I would make massive changes, substantive criminal law. Or said another way, get rid of violent or non-victim crimes. We need to get rid of victimless crimes. This is what's screwing up our criminal justice system. There are some things that need to be changed in criminal procedure because our Supreme Court, in my view, has sort of been asleep at the switch. They have not been acting as the watchdog of the legislature, as was described in the Federalist Papers. They've allowed, in the name of the drug war, in the sort of tirade to get the green leafy substance, they've made it too easy to get search warrants, to do no-knock warrants, to pull people over, to get people out of their car, and people get upset about this stuff. And when you have a situation where a good police officer is following the law and still doing the wrong thing, and somebody who's peaceful is getting upset and getting uppity about it, you get this situation. That's what we have now, and we've had for several decades. So I understand why there's a backlash against police officers, because they're enforcing ridiculous laws. We need to get the laws changed. How do we get the laws changed? We can't sneak it in. We can't do any of that. We got to convince people to coalesce around an idea called the live and let live principle, right? You leave me alone, I leave you alone. This is really an American principle. I'm writing a book about it, and maybe I'll send you guys a draft and you can kind of get a feel of what I'm talking about here. But I think we have got to start thinking differently. We live in a global society right now. Think of it as your town. We do. Whether we like it or don't like it, that's where we live. And we've got to convince our fellow human beings to accept the same principles we do before we destroy ourselves. We got very serious existential threats right now. Look, we got nuclear warheads spread out all over the planet right now, and we can't even agree to not be look, we won't strike first. You know, the United States won't even say we won't be the first strike in a nuclear war. We got numbskulls who got this. We got guys like Donald Trump. He can literally press a button, or give the order, I should say, and destroy all of humanity. Are you comfortable with that situation?
No.
We've got nukes all over the planet. Pakistan and India can't get along and both got nukes. If they start shooting them at each other, we are all going to die on the planet. We got to somehow convince our fellow humans that the live and let live principle needs to be accepted. And we can do this because it actually makes sense. If there's more reasonable people on the planet, we're going to win this argument. We got to start making it. And we got to start making it in a way that doesn't make our side look like a bunch of kooks. Instead of leading with, we should legalize methamphetamine or something like that, or, you know, fuck the government or something like this, let's lead differently. That's not working. That isn't persuading our fellow humans. We need to enter the discussion differently and start sounding less alarmist and more rational and reasonable. We need to reach out to the people who are acting in good faith. Like, for example, a lot of our left-wing brothers and sisters, they have good hearts. When they say things like, look, I want everybody to be covered by health care. That's why I support national health care. They're not coming from an evil place. What they don't understand is the difference between a moral view, which is you should be helping people less fortunate than yourself who need medical care, and a legal view, which encompasses the law and the government, and you're forced into doing something. All we got to do is convince them that their position, that we agree with them, by the way. Crack babies should be taken care of. Healthcare should be expanded. Poor people should be helped. But these are moral issues that don't go into the law. This is how virtuous people in a virtuous society do these things, because they're the right things to do, not because the government forces them into doing them. So I think we can get a lot of people on our team by simply explaining, look, if you want to put all your morality into the law, well, then so does everybody else. You're going to get the crowd who wants Sharia law into the law, and they think women should have their faces covered. The only way out of this endless arm wrestle about who should get to force who into each other's morality is to say, let's take the morality out of the law. The law is the least common denominator, the things that reasonable people agree on, which is the live and let live principle. Like, aggression is wrong. That's all we need. If I can get them to agree that aggression is wrong and aggression should be illegal, I think we win the argument from there. We got to be bold enough to put that position out first. We start with principle.
Real quick, we're almost at an hour here. We'll wrap it up here. I want to argue with you about globalism for the next a few hours, but I'm not going to do that. I want to talk about the non-aggression principle. And what is it about the drug war? I think this is very important. What is it about the drug war and these types of policies that are complete just travesties to the non-aggression principle? Like, why? Someone might say, yeah, but then someone's going to do meth. someone's going to do heroin and you're a proponent of ending the drug war. How would you respond to someone who would say how dangerous these drugs are? Look at what you're trying to do. What you want people to do meth? They would say that to you if you said that.
Well, the first thing I would want to do is clarify my position. I think that competent adults, and I'm only talking about competent adults here, so I'm not talking about kids, I'm not talking about people who aren't competent. I would say competent adults are in charge of what they put into their bodies, even if they're unhealthy things. Like, I'm of the opinion that drinking cow's milk is an unhealthy thing to do. Some people disagree with me on that. But because I think it's unhealthy, do I get to tell you you can't put it in your body?
No.
I think you should get to make this decision for you. This also doesn't mean that I should get to put people at risk. I don't get to use drugs or to go drive my car down the road and endanger other people. But if what I'm doing affects me, I should be left alone. So I can both at the same time say, I would very strongly discourage anybody from using meth on the argument that you're probably going to ruin your life if you do that, while at the same time say, look, at the end of the day, you're a big boy and you get to use meth as long as you don't endanger another person. And of course, we need to be very tough on this, right? We need to be clear. You use meth all you like in your backyard, but if you get in your car and start driving down the street, we got a problem. Now you're
reckless.
Yep. Risk. You're being reckless. So that's the position that makes sense, because think of the alternative. When we had Mayor Bloomberg in New York City saying that, those big sugary soda drinks should be illegal. I agree with him, by the way. They're horribly healthy, bad things. But do I tell everybody else that they can't use them?
No.
I mean, it's insane. So here's what I'll do, Adam. I'm going to send you a little bit of draft of my book, which includes some writings on the globalism. You'll read that, and then let's continue our conversation.
Send it to me as well, sir. I would love to read it.
I don't have your information. I'll send it to Adam and he'll to you, and you guys won't make it public yet. Give me that agreement. I'll send it out to you.
Of course.
You got it. Absolutely.
All right, guys. It was a real
Mark, I want to say thank you very much for coming on. We'd love to talk to you again. We understand you're busy, down the road. Thank you very much for creating time for us tonight to have a discussion. I appreciate the time. It was awesome. I definitely learned a couple things, and hopefully I look forward to speaking to you again, sir.
Maybe what we'll do is you guys read what I got in my book so far. Then let's do another show, and you can tell me if you think I got it wrong.
Okay. Will do. You got it.
All right.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. You have a great day, sir. Thank you very much.
All right. Peace.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the Evolve Network tonight. That was a great episode. We hope you all enjoyed the conversation. Look forward to speaking to you next week. Enjoy your day. Be good.
Peace.